Hello everybody, and welcome to Structural Functionalism Part 2. In this video, we will discuss the work of Robert K Merton. Robert K Merton was a mid-20th century sociologist. He was a student of Talcott Parsons and was active right through his death in 2003. Merton's contributions still inform sociological thinking today. You may find many of them in your intro textbooks, for example. He's important for a number of reasons which we will cover here. First, unlike his mentor Talcott Parsons, who was often criticized as being too abstract, Merton's intellectual focus was on developing what he termed theories of the middle range. We can contrast Merton with Parsons in that Parsons sought a great theory which would encompass all social action. While such an effort was taken up at a later point, particularly by the British sociologist Anthony Giddens, who we'll talk about later, Merton was not interested in a broad theory. He was interested in theoretical narratives that were systematic, that could explain specific types of social processes and social interaction. This necessarily meant scaling back theory to a level where a theoretical explanation could explain a category of social processes. Crime in poor neighborhoods, patterning your behavior based on what you must do in relation to your social responsibilities to others, for example. But not every theory was going to apply in all social processes. To do this, Merton viewed function as being both explicit, not necessarily upfront at the same time. An explicit function or a manifest function, for example, is the overt and intended purpose of action. A latent function is the implicit or unintended. Let me give you two examples. Church attendance and physically going to college classes, which many of us are not doing here. We're online. For religious Americans, church attendance, particularly in the southern United States, provides a manifest function. They're grounded in their belief system. They receive feedback from participating in a religious community that reinforces beliefs. And they receive answers about ineffable questions. What happens when we die? Is God real? And so forth. Great. This is a manifest function of the organization, particularly of a religious organization. The social structure of religious life in America and elsewhere as well. Now, church attendance also serves a latent or unintended consequence. If you are a young person or a single person, for example, and you want to find someone to share your values, the odds are you'll probably find them embedded in a religious community that shares your values. For some older traditions, this is explicit. You don't necessarily marry or date anyone outside of your value system, that is your religious community. But if you're a fairly religious person and you want to meet someone, church is often known as a good place to do it, colloquially. So the latent function of religious participation would be for people to establish affiliational relationships with like-minded people, whether they're friendships or courtship. The same was true of universities, particularly when everyone went to university when they were young, when they were 18 to 24, and they physically went to a university. The odds were, at least a generation ago, that you probably, if you were college educated, met your spouse or significant other when you were in college. That certainly is not the manifest function of a university education. That was the latent function. So society has manifest and latent functions as well, and they're embedded in what we believe to be correct as a society. It is here where Merton contributes a central piece of research that we need to pay attention to. Please see the definition of deviance on page 379 in your text. The manifest function on a society-wide level of the economy and the way that economic organization emerges and proceeds in a capitalist society in 2017 is such that work is oriented towards a goal. A manifest function. Make a wage or otherwise earn money. Why? This is a culturally approved goal. If I were to ask you, do you want $100,000? I bet the answer is going to be yes. Of course I do. This is a culturally approved goal. Very shortly, however, you would probably ask me, okay, Irvin, but why? How? Why are you going to give me $100,000? And how do you propose that I get it? So there are many ways to get $100,000 right. For Merton, there is often a disconnect between the goals of society or some other subsection of society and the norms or social rules and the beliefs which define the appropriate ways to get that $100,000. This disconnect was what Merton termed a dysfunction. It is this dysfunction that Merton's definition of deviance emerges. Deviance, according to Merton, and you can find this on page 379, is when modes of action do not conform to the dominant norms, social rules, or values of. Okay, in this diagram, what we're looking at is Merton's typology of deviance and conformity. Okay, remember that a dysfunction occurs when there is a split or a disconnect between culturally approved goals and culturally approved means to attain those goals. So, Merton's key contribution in deviance was the explanation that he provided for why people are deviant in the first place and what happens when deviance is the reality. Okay, if you look up in the left-hand corner in the blue square, we have something called conformity. This is Merton's explanation for when you have a socially approved goal and a socially approved means to achieve that goal. Let's talk about our $100,000 question for a minute. To conform, everyone, the goal is, of course, to get $100,000. That's a culturally approved goal. The culturally approved means to get that goal are not infinite, however. We can work or invest money, or inherit the money, or win the lottery. Those are all culturally approved means for attaining the goal, getting $100,000. The key explanation for a lot of criminology and why people commit crimes, or at least people who don't have the means at their disposal to achieve a culturally approved goal of getting $100,000, is what Merton termed innovation. Okay? You have a socially approved goal, the $100,000, but you have called the innovative means to attain that goal, which meant that they were at odds or a disconnect from socially approved means. What would that be? Well, I could rob a bunch of convenience stores, commit extortion, or fraud, or something like that. All of these are criminal, but they would be ways in which we would achieve the socially approved goal of making $100,000. Now, if we move down to the square, ritualism, this was the closest that Merton gets to an explanation of alienation. It is when we are going through the motions. We are not deviant. We're not doing anything wrong, but we are merely proceeding along what might be socially approved means, for example, working a job, but we've lost sight of our original goal, that is to make money. We're just sort of surviving. We've lost the goal orientation. And what that was in terms of Merton was what he called ritualism. If we move over to the fourth quadrant, the square, the green square here, we see retreatism. That would be eschewing or abandoning both socially approved goals and means. This is the drug addict, the person who is addicted to alcohol, or maybe a person who is mentally ill. Note here that deviance for Merton is bigger than just crime. It's at odds with the norms of society. Finally, this pink square down here, rebellion, means that we usurp both goals and means. We don't want $100,000. We want a society where everybody gets an equal amount of everything. So we overthrow both the goals and the means to attain those goals and replace the system with new goals and means. Society.